Hi, this is Shamel Lane, and I'm here with the first video in the series of 5 videos for Pretty Paper Party. I hope you've enjoyed the class, and the 5 videos are going to take you through a few things that can help you take what was presented in the class and then continue into your own project. So basically 5 different topics of food for thought and some examples, and most of these examples are things that are from my existing albums. So they may be things that you've already seen, or if you are relatively new, then it may be all new to you. But just some things that I want to point out and give you some real examples of pages that have already live in my albums that I really enjoy, and different things that can make scrapbooking even that little bit more fun. So today's topic is all about embellishing, and one of the things that comes up quite often is the way in which I tend to embellish, which is in groups of random little things that, or perhaps they seem random, but they really aren't all that random at all. There's definite method to my madness. So today I want to take you through a stack of layouts that have examples of that style of embellishment and show you a few different things for making them, for using them on your pages, what supplies you could pull out to create bunches and bunches of these kinds of embellishments, and also how to place them on your page, or when to place them on your page. So the first thing I want to do is show you some real layouts and give you examples of where they go. And what I tend to do is I place my embellishments in groups of 1, 2, 3, or lots. That's how I separate everything. I would rarely do something with specifically 4 embellishments or specifically 5, but I would do 1, 2, or 3 each specifically, and then a page that just has bunches and bunches. So I'm going to start with 1 and show you some examples. Here's the first page, and this is just one embellishment. It's right in the center of the page. It's centered below 2 photographs, and it's a page without a great big title or anything bold like that, and the embellishment and the title are all one element. And it's a lot of layers, but all held into one little place with the use of the tag. So the tag is still the original size and shape, and then I just layered on different pieces. So I've stamped the tag and then cut a layer of tulle fabric. I'm not sure if you can see that there, but that just gives a bit more texture, and it creates a nice shadow. Then a square pattern paper, a circle of cardstock, a scallop circle, a punched flower, a camera die cut, and this little bit of trim mixed in there with the layers, and then this letter sticker, and then I've torn the letter sticker and stapled it back together just to give it a little bit more texture and try and emphasize or repeat some of the things that are in the photos of this performance set. So with this first example, I would say look for things in your photos, but don't feel like you have to necessarily recreate something really big or really obvious. And also, one embellishment can be a great link between a big initial or a small title and then some further details, so like a title and a subtitle. This is another example of one embellishment group, and that's right here. It's the only group of random things on the page. Everything else is very orderly. And what I wanted to show you here is that this embellishment came entirely from this die cut. I chose this die cut with the colors and the wording, and then built the whole rest of the page around that. So I had the die cut and the photo and built everything else to match. And the shape here, this red scrolled square, I suppose you would call that, that came from here, and they're not from the same collection, but they have a repeated color, a repeated shape, and then I just gathered other elements that would work with that. So a little bit of a letter sticker, some scraps of the other patterns that are on the page, and a red butterfly to bring that color back together. And then I placed it opposite where this die cut goes, and we'll come back to that sort of placement in a moment. But the idea that the photo is in between 2 different things for you to look at, but there's just one grouping here. And the green on top, I also just put one splash of green to pick up all this green in the photo. That leads us into times when you use two groups of embellishments and different ways that you can include them on a layout. Starting with this one, which is just a single photo layout, there's really two groups of embellishment here. There is a tiny little bit here, but I would say there are two groups of embellishment, and they run in a straight line and they're either side of the photo. And the trick here is that one group is bigger than the other. So the photo's over to the side, there's only room for a small group of embellishment on one side, but then there's more room for a larger group on the other side. But because the embellishments are either side of the picture, that means that the photo is going to be what grabs your attention. And the title is purposely placed in between those two things as well. And the title then leads down into the journaling, so everything has a natural flow, even though there's quite a lot of empty space at the top of the page. And a similar thing with two groups of embellishment, but this time on the diagonal and with a photo in the center of the page. So there's one large group of embellishment here, and then a very similar group here, even though this one is completely floral and this one is banners. The papers are the same colors and patterns, and then the title right on top of that. But because there's this diagonal line with the photo in the middle, it takes your eye from one side to the other. Same thing with the diagonal in this case, but spread out across the page. So for a more minimal look, the photo is on its own in the middle of the page and the embellishments are at the far corners. I do like when you can take a group of embellishments like this and run them off the page and cut off part of the circle. It makes the design look like it was meant to be there. It's not floating. So if you can take a group of embellishments and move them just off the side of the page and then cut off anything that goes over the 12 by 12, then sometimes that will really help them look like they're meant to be there. Moving on to something a bit busier, definitely not minimal. This is still a two-part embellishment. There's one group here and there's one group here. Now I've got two photos, I've got way more pattern paper and lots more layers in each of the embellishments, but it's still following that same rule. One group here, diagonal across the photo into the second group with the title. So this is what still grabs your attention. I think that's quite an important way to balance pages that have lots of little details, is to make sure that you can still find the photo in all of that detail. And that brings us to pages with three groups of embellishment. And this one is not all that dissimilar to the last with two. So very similar embellishment, same sort of product. But here the photos are more orderly, lined up, and the dominant color here is red in both of the corner embellishments. So to add a third group of embellishments, I just found something else in the collection that also had that red and just added a smaller group of embellishments to form a triangle. So there was a lot of open empty space up here and quite a lot going on at the bottom of the page. So just a small group of embellishments that's on that diagonal again, to try and balance this out and make it so that this part of the page isn't too heavy and weighted down. But the use of the same color in three different places is often really useful to bring in quite a lot of embellishment without it being overwhelming. Or you can do something very, very simple with three embellishments, and that's create exactly the same embellishment 3 times. So this layer of embellishments, it's a scallop circle cut, punched from embossed cardstock, and then 3 layers of flowers and a brad on top. So I just made 3 matching. Had added my photos, I had added my my journaling and my title already, and then dotted them about in a triangle so that the title, the photos, and the journaling were all inside that triangle, and that frames everything and brings it all together. And then just repeated the same brads here in a little row to give a little bit of balance to the top of the page, which was mostly not embellished. Same thing with the repeated 3 embellishments here, exact same technique, just a little bit less rigid to the rest of the page design. Very simple layering of the same elements, 3 of them, and they make a triangle around the photos, and then this time the title and the journaling are slightly outside of the triangle. Now, this, however, is still 3 embellishments. So these 3 pieces are the larger embellishments, and they're built in a similar but not matching way. So they each have layers of circles, some pinked and some plain. They each have floral elements. They each have some chipboard. They each have some things that are up on Pop Dots. So those 3 then here, they still form a triangle, but normally everything I've said has been embellished around the photo. In this case, I wanted the journaling to be the more important part of the page because this photo is in my album more than once. And also, well, it's not the same exact photo, but we took more than one photo in this place. And also, this photo is so bright compared to the colors of the page that it doesn't really need much more to grab your attention because it's ridiculously bright, and then I've scrapped it with mostly pastel colors. So I wanted to bring the embellishment into the journaling so that there was more attention brought to that because it's a bit more subtle. And I layered up all these different die cuts before I added the journaling on top, but added the embellishments still in a triangle to try to bring your attention to the words. And to balance this big element of lots of embellishment and lots of layers, you'll notice the rest of the page around the outside is very empty, so that there's plenty of room for this kind of little bit of crazy to breathe, and then it doesn't become too overwhelming. I say overwhelming a lot. Moving on. This again is 3 groups of embellishment. So there's one group here, there's one group here in the middle, and one group here in the bottom. And here I've got 2 on the diagonal, and then one that's kind of, it's in between. It's sort of a triangle, I suppose. It could be a very stretched triangle, but really sometimes you want to bring everything together with a different element. So the reason I wanted to show you this one is because the page design it's this grid that's holding everything together, and the photo is part of that grid. And then you can take, so this was from a sketch from the Sassafras blog, and their sketch was very much, it was like a grid with 4 boxes and then a scallop at the bottom. And I just wanted to show you this to see that you can take something that looks really graphic in the sketch and you can add more and more layers on top until it's really not at all rigid and square. So the underlying design here is one of 4 rectangles put together, but by putting lots of embellishment on the corner and then this one big layer across the middle, you can soften something that's very, very grid-like. And last one with 3 embellishments, and that's this page here with a larger photo than the other examples. And here there's 3 groupings of embellishment, but they're all in a vertical line with a horizontal photo. So everything is still drawing your attention to the picture. There's no embellishment over here. There's no embellishment down here in this bottom corner. Everything is in the line. And here, very similar to one of the other layouts I showed you, I've added pieces, cut them off, and then stuck them onto the other side so that the 2 sides are coordinating. So the same elements are repeating, just a little bit more mixed up. And then there's a bit more freedom in the embellishment in the center of the page. And so these are the exact same pieces, but this brown die cut shows up in both places, and the colors are very similar to bring everything together. And then there's this splash of orange and red in the middle that's not represented anywhere else. So sometimes it helps to have 2 elements that are quite, I wouldn't say minimal, but quite limited in the range of color and design and very similar. And then with the 3rd embellishment, you can go to town a little bit more and add more things, more colors, more textures. Now, then we move on. So we've done things with 1 embellishment and things with 2 embellishments and things with 3 embellishments. And now we move on to things with lots of embellishments. I want to show you one that's kind of in between, and that's this page. And I would still almost want to qualify this as 3, because I read this as this is a group of embellishments, this is a group of embellishments, and this is a group of embellishments, and they form a triangle with the photo on that line. But I did add a little bit of embellishment to the journaling as well. and these embellishments are all quite spread out. So this is working toward kind of everywhere. But I think this, I would still call 3, and I just wanted to show it to you to say that if you feel that there's a certain element of the page that's just not quite gelling, don't be afraid to go in and add a little bit more if the 1, 2, 3 isn't quite right. Sometimes you just need a tiny little bit extra to pull it all together, or sometimes you make a mistake and you need to cover something up. So just adding something similar that's a repeated design from elsewhere can be just fine. But then there are pages with lots and lots of embellishments, like this. And I love pages like this, but I think if I did every layout like this, I think my albums would be a little less based on the story, and your eye would go so much toward all the detail and the embellishment that it would be hard to take the word seriously. So I tend to do pages like this just sporadically through an album rather than every single page. But I do love bits and pieces like this where you can just mix all sorts of things onto the page. And I find that one way to make lots of different embellishments work together is for them to all have something in common. So all of these layers all have the same brown pinked circle underneath. And then they all have a circle layer that's the same size, but the pattern papers are all different. So from there, they're all unique, but that base layer is the same on each piece, which helps it all work in a unified way. And these are the same, just in a smaller size. This is a page that divides a section in my album, by the way, if that helps you see where I might use a page like this. This is when, like in the album, it changes from one destination to another. So this is the first page about Cambodia, and then there's more pages that follow with more extended detail and more photographs. And same sort of thing, but on a smaller scale and more repeated. 9 embellishments, all with that same circle, and in fact, here there are more elements that repeat. So the same butterflies with the rhinestones in the middle, the same buttons, and the same colors. So a little bit more similar than the circles on this page, but again, just the idea that you could create several of them, and they kind of work as one embellishment here or as a grid of 9. So it just depends on what is your preferred style. And some people would think this was too busy. Some people would think that you could still have more room to add a few more of these up here and down here to kind of bring it all together. So I just wanted to show you that variety so you could see examples of 1 embellishment, 2 embellishments, 3, or a whole bunch.